Welcome and thanks for joining us. I am joined today by Nick Andersen, the Executive Assistant Director for Cybersecurity at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Nick, thank you for joining me and thank you for having me here at CISA.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah, this is fantastic for our Cyber Leaders Exchange. It's great to be in the heart of the nation's cyber defense agency with you here, talking about some of your top priorities since you've joined the agency just a little while back. I'd love, though, if we could start. I know you've had a number of different cyber jobs. I won't go through all of them, but it seems as if you've kind of been circling CISA your whole career, and now you're here. Can you talk a little bit about why you took this job, what you hope to accomplish?
Sure, so I think that's exactly it. I think it's been just years of me having the opportunity to work with CISA as a partner or as a customer of CISA. You know, I've worked in state government as a CISO, I've worked in the intelligence community as a CIO, been at the federal CIO's office and at an SRMA, a sector risk management agency over at Energy. Every one of those opportunities sort of gave me the chance to work with CISA and its predecessor. This is a fantastic opportunity to sort of jump in feet first here within this agency. And I'll tell you, from somebody who on the outside in thought that I knew a lot of what CISA was doing day to day, I really did not have an appreciation for just how much work this agency is doing every single day to, secure the federal civilian executive branch agencies and the nation's critical infrastructure. It's really a humbling amount of work, to be surrounded by.
Absolutely. And I know you're only a few weeks in. I'd love if you could just talk a little bit about what you've been doing in your first few weeks in terms of leading the cybersecurity division, and if you have any priorities that are starting to kind of emerge.
Sure. It's the early opportunities for me have been interacting with the staff, sort of understanding the mission better, interacting with our customers and partners. There's an expansive group of people that we work with every single day, from our international partners to those within the interagency to federal civilian executive branch agencies and departments to help them fulfill their mission of defending the .gov enterprise. And key to all of that is the success that the staff is able to achieve here at Team CISA. So that's been a lot of my focus, has just been taking the opportunity to sort of meet with them, understand our current gaps, sort of provide a little bit of guidance against those priorities, to say this is where we're going to lean in and this is where we're going to grow, and these are some of the things that we're probably not going to be focused on going forward. I think the rallying and focal point for us as we continue to move forward is just got to be laser focused on the threat of China 2027. The Chinese government has done us has done us kindness and clearly articulating what their goals are, and then clearly demonstrating within the operating environment their intentions. And that, I think, should be a rallying cry for all of us. And that's really where I want to sort of laser focus the staff is, what are we doing to defend this nation's greatest assets? We have an economy, we have a national security, we have a public health system that is incredibly reliant on technology and the associated infrastructure. And if we want to do right by our fellow citizens, by our neighbors, by our friends and family, it really requires us to show up and give our best every single day. And that, if I'm just hyper summarizing it to one point, it's what are we doing to deter the threat of China 2027?
And I'm sure in terms of preparing for that China threat, rising tide kind of lifts all boats against other cyber threats that are, of course, out there. I want to hook into something you said in terms of talking with the staff, what CISA will be doing and what it won't be doing going forward. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I know that CISA has obviously lost a number of staff over the last 9 months or so, and I'm sure that's impacted the cybersecurity division, and its budget is still up in the air in Congress, but if the president's budget passes, its budget will be going down a little bit. So obviously you've got to prioritize. And I'd love if you could talk a little bit more detail about what those priorities look like and what the priorities are in terms of what you're not going to do going forward.
Sure. I think when we look at what we shouldn't be doing going forward, I've said for a number of years, well predating my arrival here at CISA, that I think it's really been unfair to CISA as an agency and to the mission it was supposed to serve, for just the inordinate amount of things that were sort of continuously hung around CISA's neck to be able to say, there's been some sort of problem that's emerged, give it to CISA, CISA will take care of it. And it sort of led to this constantly ever increasing scope of work that the agency was responsible for. Again, both within the federal family, within the interagency, but also when it comes to delivering services directly to citizens and with our state, local, tribal, and territorial partners. So I think for us, it's about focusing on the core operational norms of what is CISA supposed to be delivering. We've got a couple of core things we're supposed to be delivering. We're supposed to protect the .gov and work with federal, civilian, executive branch agencies. We're supposed to be the national coordinator for critical infrastructure security and resilience. We're supposed to be the nation's cyber defense agency, and that is a wide and expansive mission of working with OEM partners to make sure that we're helping them to identify opportunities to develop and build equipment that is secure from the start, secure by design. We've got opportunities to be able to work on our immediate sort of response capabilities that are out there, and we've got sort of the longer term planning efforts that we have to be engaged in collaboratively, in particular with critical infrastructure owner operators throughout the critical infrastructure sectors that CISA helps to sort of maintain and shepherd through a number of different sort of threat events within the environment. That's at a broad brushstroke, just sort of refocusing ourselves on why is it that we exist and what is it that we're supposed to be doing. Now let's take all the things that are good ideas and let's set those to the side until we've really demonstrated some mastery over our core competencies.
At Billington, Billington Cyber Conference in September, one of the phrases that I heard maybe half a dozen times at least during different panels was secure by design. That clearly has entered the lexicon as something that every cyber leader wants. Mm-hmm. CISA had been kind of driving that forward. I think some of the folks who were driving that effort forward left over the spring. Do you anticipate that you'll continue to kind of prioritize those efforts? Yeah,
certainly. I mean, I think you see the clear demonstration, as part of, leading from the front on this. Secretary Noem was able to go out and I think lay a fairly clear vision at one of her earliest engagements to speak about cyber in sort of a dedicated way at RSA earlier this year. And she made reference to programs like Secure by Design, and that's because it is core and critical to our thinking for what's important over the long term for the technology ecosystem. And it's core and critical to our thinking for how we start to get ahead of this challenge. I mean, we can only go play whack-a-mole so many times all day, every single day. That's going to continue no matter what. We have a lot of technical debt as a federal government. We have a lot of technical debt as a technology community to sort of overcome, but we're never going to be able to get to the point where we start to be able to get on the side of the curve where we can start to manage that until Secure by Design isn't just a single point in time activity that we're performing, but we have really a decade plus of persistent engagement in that regard to help us sort of get over these challenges. I don't know how many of our houses or how many of our businesses or government agencies are running equipment that's more than, insert number of years here old. So until we start to engage in a really significant way with the OEM community to engage in Secure by Design as a core operating principle, it's going to take years to be able to sort of see that come to fruition.
In terms of the federal civilian executive branch, obviously, as you mentioned, a huge role for CISA in helping to secure those networks. Really important programs, as you know, continuous diagnostics and mitigation, CDM, and others. How are you thinking about how CISA can better serve the federal civilian executive branch cyber operators from the cybersecurity division?
Yeah, we've got to come up with better acronyms. That's like a real mouthful to have to get out your federal civilian executive branch cyber operators. We have to come up with a creative marketing acronym for that.
Sure.
But it's within our Fed cyber community. Maybe that's it, just the Fed cyber community. We've got a lot of great programs that we offer. I think you've seen sort of the expansion of that, and it's exciting to be able to see them in operation today. From the last time when I was here during the first Trump administration and working at the federal CIO's office, we saw a lot of transitional elements that we layered into CISA as President Trump sort of brought that agency into existence. Things like protective DNS, transitioning the .gov, top-level domain. There are lots of opportunities there to continue to engage in activities like that don't just provide benefit to federal civilian executive branch, but also provide benefit to our state and local partners that are also the beneficiary of .gov services. So CDM, I think, is a great example of a program that's seen a lot of success over the last several years. I think we've gone from much like the CVE program, where I've discussed sort of going from a growth era to a quality era now as we continue to see the evolution there. I think CDM is in a similar spot. You know, the first tranche of CDM was just try to provide the opportunity for agencies and departments to be able to procure a certain suite of services and solutions that were going to make them more secure and collectively raise the bar. Now I think we need to get to the point where we're operating in a little bit more of a common manner. You know, for me, it doesn't make a lot of sense if we think about the OPM breach back in the day. A lot of that required a surge of resources in terms of personnel to be able to help out with that sort of emergent mission need. How much more difficult is that when you don't have a common stack that you're falling in on to say, yes, I've got premier cyber operators that can go from this department over to this department to help them out with an emerging incident. If this department is using tool X and this one's using tool Y, though, that's going to be a little bit more of a steep learning curve. So for us, I think CDM it's again, just like all these other programs that we're looking at right now, it's a sort of a growth and evolution point for how do we continue the successes that it's already delivered, but how do we build on them for the next sort of set of priorities.
Are there any other programs that you're taking a particularly hard look at in your division right now?
So within the cybersecurity division, you know, we've got several very expansive programs. I mentioned one with CVE. Mm-hmm. You know, that's one that's been provided for more than a quarter of a decade. That's a fantastic one within our vulnerability management subdivision. But you know, vulnerability management does a lot more than just CVE. You know, the vulnerability enrichment program is another good example that they've got. We've also got our threat hunt and incident response teams. And again, that's a program that I want to be able to continue to grow and mature. I want to be able to grow and mature those skill sets sort of across the board for our federal cyber operators. We've got our tech director's office that is looking at the challenges related to things like PQC and, you know, AI and the opportunity to both use it for, you know, defenders, but also what are the potential threats and vulnerabilities associated with it. We've got our capacity building folks that are working on things like BODs, binding operational directives, and EDs, emergency directives, but also looking at how do we enable the federal enterprise, you know, to do things a little more smartly, and that's where our CDM program lies. We've got a huge breadth of capabilities there across the board, and lastly with our JCDC team, you know, that's where a lot of the partnership work takes place, and a lot of the products that you see coming out of CSD come out of JCDC. And for a lot of folks that are interacting with CISA from afar, you know, they view that individual person within programs like that as CISA. So when I'm looking at sort of all of those subdivisions, they've all got a lot of fantastic programs that we're going to be growing. But in addition to the ones that I've already mentioned, I think we're going to look back at some of the original intent beyond things like the Joint Cyber Planning Office initiative that was put into statute and the Joint Collaborative Environment. Those are core and critical, I think, for how we work as a coordinator. And you know, people have used the quarterback analogy in the past. You know, people have beat me to using that by several years, so I'm not gonna use that. But when we look at being the nation's cyber defense agency and the coordinator, for us that means I need a common operating environment for people to collaborate, for people to analyze and conduct joint operations together. That's really what I think JCE has to evolve into. And the Joint Cyber Planning Office as an initiative is going to take these partnerships that we've already developed over a number of years and just continue to deepen them and make them more operationally relevant.
Yeah, that seems really important in terms of all the different partnerships that CISA maintains that you've already talked about across state and local governments, international partners, fellow federal agencies. How far along is the JCP in terms of developing that common operating picture, and would you like to see that accelerate? Where do you think that's at?
Yeah, I mean, I think we absolutely want to see that accelerate. You know, the last couple of years, I think they've sort of been able to have the opportunity to get to V1. Mm-hmm. You know, for us, I want it to be an environment that people can go to and we can actually jointly plan operational missions. Not just if we're seeing something, but I want it to be a place that if our industry partners are seeing something that's happening within the environment, they can share that information, and not just with us, but with other industry partners as well. It's exceedingly important. You know, if I'm part of the telecommunications, you know, industry, it doesn't need to be a single hub and spoke relationship with somebody just sharing information with CISA. And a lot of these relationships amongst industry are already incredibly robust and incredibly mature. And a lot of these people have worked with each other for a long time, which is of great benefit to us. We just want to institutionalize that. I need to make it where it's not dependent on John Doe knowing Jane Doe at company A and company B and being able to exchange that information based on trust relationships. We need to be the provider of persistent trust relationships that can sort of endure people coming and going from these institutions and organizations. That's, I think, at the sort of the heart of what we should be doing as part of our cyber mission.
Okay, well, and that kind of leads into the work that you all do with critical infrastructure, I think, as well. In terms of, we talked at the top about the China threat. Salt Typhoon has obviously been in the headlines for quite some time now, and we're learning more about it every day from advisories from CISA and other agencies about how long this group, this China-linked group, has been in telecommunications networks. Do you have any updates just in terms of CISA's efforts to review Salt Typhoon, to work with the telecommunications industry to root out this threat?
Yeah, I mean, so I think beyond just Salt Typhoon, I think our opportunities to continue to work with the telecommunications industry persists day in and day out. I had the opportunity just last week to sit down in a room with, I'd say, the overwhelming majority of major telecommunications CISOs. And one of the things I shared with them was, again, I don't want this to be a CISA sending out an alert, you respond, you let us know what you were able to do about it. I view us as needing to be sort of their voice and their advocate here within the nation's capital to be able to say, this is what we're hearing from critical infrastructure owner-operators. This is incredibly important, again, for providing and supporting citizen services, not just those that are provided by the government, but those commercially that people rely on for everyday life. So I think the persistent interaction that we have with them is fantastic. But on Salt and Volt in particular, you made reference to some of the cybersecurity advisories that we've put out as those agency multi-seal products and bringing in our international partners. The point that I think we're trying to make as we sort of shift our messaging there is just making sure, and this is something that's fairly well known within the cyber community, but for the broader policy stakeholder community, we want to make sure it's well known, is that Salt Typhoon and Volt Typhoon aren't point-in-time incidents. They aren't point-in-time events. These are persistent threat actors with persistent campaigns that are going to continue to target our nation's infrastructure, whether it's commercial critical infrastructure or it's government infrastructure. So for us, I think that's really the focus for us, is making sure that we are resilient over the long term rather than trying to focus on individual point in time. I've got evidence of exploitation here. This is where I see the threat actor. That's great. Let's take those TTPs. Let's apply them much more broadly and share information more broadly. We've got some really great things going on with JCDC helps to sponsor the Chainbreaker initiative, which we have as specifically and explicitly focused on a China threat and bringing together a core community to say defensively, how would we respond to several different scenarios regarding them as a threat actor. Those sort of longer term, more strategic engagements using Salt Typhoon and Volt Typhoon as illustrative examples of the type of activity we're going to see, I think is going to be where we're going to shift. Because the fact of the matter is, China is pre-positioning in our nation's critical infrastructure to take advantage of it at a time and place of their choosing. When we look at things like Volt Typhoon, this is not an intelligence gathering exercise. In my mind, this is wartime planning. That's all that this is. So the point that we're trying to make and sort of the mindset shift for people is, if I give you a physical example of if 18 months from now you knew that a hurricane was going to hit your home, what would you be doing? Are you going to be shoring up every single piece of your house and hoping the entire thing is going to be standing still? No, probably not. You're not going to be able to protect everything all the time no matter what. But being able to look over that longer time horizon, what are the preparation activities you can take now and what are the ones you can plan for over the course of the next year to know absolutely for sure you are in the front lines of an emerging war. How are you going to protect yourselves right now?
In terms of the traction that you're able to gain with this messaging, with these collaborative activities, do you have a sense of how far, how deep you've gotten and how much further there is to go? Because these conversations are obviously commonplace here in Washington, D.C., within the cybersecurity community, but within a smaller water utility in rural America or another sort of critical infrastructure sector, this may still be a relative unknown.
Well, I think we've done a great job over the last decade or so raising general awareness, but I still think there's a lot to do with the types of services that we provide, and this is where it's fantastic just to see, because again, as a prior state CISO from a state that did not have a tremendous amount of resources to be able to dedicate to cybersecurity, we have a whole host of services that we provide to the state, local, tribal, territorial, or the SLTT community every single day. And they're free services, they're persistently available, and core and critical around that are our cybersecurity advisors, our emergency communications folks, and our protective security advisors, our CSAs, PSAs, ECCs, that are out there in the field. And they're providing sort of persistent engagement in the regions, which again is fantastic for raising general awareness and sort of providing a suite of free services. The engagement that we're going to have to continue to do with our SLTT partners and with critical infrastructure owner-operators that are less resourced, like you made reference to water. The vast preponderance of water is run out of local municipal governments. There's not a giant federalized system of water providers across the board to be able to look at consolidated risk. Again, we've been able to go from general awareness of the threat to now here's what we need to go do about it. That's the next stage of this partnership, I think, is going from generic educational information exchange to operational information exchange and to actually implementing countermeasures that are going to help them to be more resilient overall. And that, whether it's focus on China 2027 or just increased resilience for local communities, I think that's really where you're going to see a lot of the operational focus of CISA over the next several years. Just going to be, okay, great, we recognize there's a threat, what are we doing about it?
Okay. We talked about the CVE program, or you made reference to the CVE program earlier, and I want to dive into that a little bit, the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures database that CISA obviously plays a role in, and a big role in, and I think you've come out and said that CISA should play perhaps an even stronger role in this program, this service going forward. Talk a little bit about how you're getting after that.
Sure. So I think I made reference earlier, CVE program has persisted for over a quarter of a century at this point, and it's core and critical to what we do as an agency. CVEs are feeding into how we're identifying things and putting it into the KEVs, into the known exploited vulnerabilities database, to be able to sort of provide some focus for our cyber defenders and also provide sort of tipping and cueing to our industry and state and local partners about what we're seeing in the environment and where we think they should focus some of their time as well. But for us, it's focusing from our growth era of getting up to, in excess of 460, I believe, CVE numbering authorities, to now how do we focus on quality. This has been done in sort of lighter touch ways over the last several years. Like I made reference to the Vuln Enrichment program earlier, which again is just, we're trying to further enrich the data that's available to defenders, to developers, as they're looking at vulnerabilities that exist within the environment. For us, we now want to put that on steroids. We really want to be able to provide a governance structure that's going to allow for long-term success for what is essentially a public good or a public service, which is what CVE is. I mean, this is foundational to internet security much more broadly. And as part of that, we want to make sure that like the international partners have a seat at the table. There's a lot of folks that are rightfully so concerned about how they're going to manage risk within their countries and within their environments. We see the EU with things like the Cyber Resilience Act, the CRA, as they continue to sort of push forward standards for what they expect for software and hardware vendors. We don't want to see a bifurcation of that environment either. We don't want to see an EU solution and a rest of world solution, or an EU solution, a US solution, and many other countries with individual solutions. Because the most important part of the CVE program is the C, is this common. We need a common operational understanding of what's happening in the environment and what the potential threats are, and that starts with vulnerability enumeration. So for us, we're going to be continuing to invest in that in a really big way to make sure that it can persist and make sure it can sort of stand the test of time as the public good and service that it is.
Have you had a chance to have conversations with those international partners, with folks like the CVE Foundation about CISA's vision for this program going forward?
So I can't say that I've, in particular, spoken to anybody with the CVE Foundation. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really just a notional idea that sort of exists. So no, I can't really say that I've invested a tremendous amount of time speaking to anybody there. But we have spoken quite a bit with our international partners, and that was perhaps one of the better timed elements of my, starting here at CISA. Was it happened to be at a time when a lot of our international partners were coming into town to engage for Billington, where we had a chance to have a conversation. So I was able to meet with, our Canadian counterparts, our UK counterparts, our Australian counterparts, and be able to have some of those conversations with them face to face, not just virtually, which is fantastic. And I think they are able to demonstrate, I think, the same level of commitment that we have to seeing the success over the long term. The sort of twists and turns that existed as a result of what I think were really just messaging snafus regarding the CVE program. I just don't know what else we can do other than putting our money where our mouth is and demonstrating good governance and showing that CISA is greatly committed to the success of this program over the long term.
I misspoke. I should have said the CVE board there instead of the foundation. But there's a lot of stakeholders in this ecosystem, and
Yep.
a lot of folks have a lot to say about it. Next, any inclination toward, you've laid out this vision, what to watch out for as far as next steps in moving down this path?
Yeah, for us, I think we're excited to continue to sort of move forward with new governance structure. Bring some of those stakeholders that I made reference to, like our international partners, to the table in a big way. Our opportunity for looking at sort of the Council of Roots and where some of the technical work is happening within these working groups and sort of elevating that within the profile of CVE. We want to make sure that those technical contributors and the folks that are, again, helping to do the hard work of making the CVE program work across the board as an international good, we want to make sure that they're appropriately elevated and appropriately represented here. So more to follow on that for sure.
Well, we've gone quite a while, and I think we've only mentioned AI one time, perhaps, so I think it's time to start talking about it more, as everyone is. But for CISA, I mean, this is such a fascinating issue. Both the threat that of AI systems that AI systems pose, as far as hackers using them,
Yep.
as far as the security of different AI systems and tools themselves, and then how they can help cyber defenders. How are you approaching this issue in your initial days here at CISA?
Well, I think for us, it's both about identifying opportunities for us to take advantage of AI and AI-based solutions or ML solutions, and implementing them within the environment to provide for additional volume that defenders can take advantage of, and helping to sort of automate out the tasks that a machine can take care of, and leaving humans take care of the things that we need a trained human analyst eye on for them to take care of. The threat space is absolutely real here, both in terms of the potential development of novel exploits, the additional, just as we increase, efficiency on volume on the defender side, folks that are malicious cyber actors are going to continue to increase their opportunity for volume on their side as AI becomes more prevalent. And that's where we really want to be able to put together good governance around what does right look like within the AI space, and what kind of guidance can we provide to help secure it. And additionally, I think we're trying to put a lot of thought around LLM, large language model provenance and large language model security, and how we can sort of develop trust overall. For me, it's very important, if I'm just a user, if I'm not even sitting here at CISA, if I'm just a user of an artificial intelligence tool, I want to know, how am I getting the answer that I'm getting? And is it a trustworthy source of information? I mean, we've sort of seen the quirky cases that have been called out of, a lawyer that tries to use it and it creates a footnote, for case law that doesn't actually exist. So now we see things, like we see the legal community going, forming around solutions that have a little bit more fidelity around pulling from only trusted sources to be a tool for that community. I think that's what we're going to see a little bit more until we see sort of broader trust within the ecosystem, is we're going to continue to sort of see these more powerful niche solutions within sort of these vertical elements that can be served by that community. But for us, again, it's guidance and standards. It's how can we work with these companies? How can we sort of provide some assurances around provenance? And then how can we, using our expertise and our resources here, demonstrate the capabilities of artificial intelligence to really be a force multiplier for defenders in a way that we can pilot and demonstrate for them to be implemented federal government-wide and within our wider critical infrastructure and SLTT community.
We've covered a lot of ground, but in terms of where CISA's cybersecurity division is going, anything that you want to tease out, perhaps, for folks to watch out for through the end of the year? We have a lot of big issues to work through on Capitol Hill. We'll see what happens there. But from what you can control, what are you focused on?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of focus, I think, on our critical infrastructure owner-operator community. When we just look at terms of impact and consequence, again, for local citizens in their communities, which is really, I think, where we start to refocus ourselves. We don't provide defense for government services for the sake of defending a government agency. We do that because the American people are expecting a degree of service and some sort of delivery in exchange for sending their tax dollars here and expecting the federal government to provide something. It's the same thing with our critical infrastructure owner-operator community. That's really where you start to see impacts. People are paying for a service. They're paying their electric bill, they're paying their water bill, whatever it is, because they've come to rely on an essential service. I think we're really going to try to shift our focus into consequence and what does it mean to operate and defend, to deliver secure operations for those environments. So for me, that means a lot of shift into building up our expertise in the industrial control systems space and in the operational technology space, not just the IT space, where I think we've demonstrated a tremendous amount of expertise over the last several years. I think critical infrastructure, owner-operator coordination, and sort of building up zones of resilience across our nation that we can come to rely upon for protecting the nation's economy, our national security, public health and safety, et cetera. I think that's going to be a really important one for us. And we want to, excuse me, we want to reach out and increase our coordination with partners that I think are ready and available and willing, but perhaps we have not done as much work to bring them into the fold in the past, like our state and local community and our National Guard partners, as an example. There's National Guard units trained in cyberspace operations, defensive and otherwise, all throughout these our states and territories, and they're part of local communities. They have a vested interest in the success and the defense of these essential services, and they're there. They're present. I mean, there's a certain degree of intimacy that comes from not just knowing technically what to do, but also knowing the impact and how it connects and how it operates within the local community and having those relationships with individual people. So I think that's going to be an effort for us that we're going to try to pursue in a big way. Also, very selfishly, just because CISA, if I had unlimited hiring authority and we hired 10 to 20,000 people here at CISA just to focus on incident response and threat hunting, I'd never have enough. The threat's going to constantly continue to evolve and shift and change. So we need to be able to expand to a base of partners that are going to help us to be able to rise, sort of meet that challenge. And I think entities like the National Guard and some of our state and local partners, I think that's where it needs to happen.
That's threat hunting on critical infrastructure networks, specifically the services CISA provides?
Yep, absolutely. And I think our partnership with the OEM community is going to be a big sort of getting upstream of that challenge. Again, so whether it's initiatives like Secure by Design or some of our other initiatives that we're focused in here with operational technology in particular, we really need to partner with those communities in a significant way to make sure that we're all sort of building to a higher standard within the community to really exercise due diligence and due care on behalf of the people that are relying on these services.
Okay, well, a lot to watch out for there, and I really, though, appreciate the time and the opportunity to come here and speak to you about your priorities here at CISA. So again, he's Nick Andersen, Executive Assistant Director for Cybersecurity at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right. I'm Justin Doubleday. You're watching Federal News Network. I'm going to send you back to the studio for more on the Cyber Leaders Exchange.